This is how the British Empire could have collapsed or been drastically reduced in size just after the conclusion of the Great War. Welcome to Project Kaisertum, episode 4, where the timeline starts with Germany winning the Great War by capturing Paris in 1914. The British found themselves on the losing side of the war, and although the Irish Rebellion, called the Easter Rising in 1916, was crushed by the British, it inspired anti-British sentiment around the world. This failed Irish Rebellion becomes a symbol for freedom fighters against the British around the world, with the cloverleaf becoming a symbol against British imperialism. In the previous episode, France was having trouble with Algerian rebels. Tensions would quickly spill to the British Empire as well. While the French would quickly defeat the Algerian rebels, anti-British sentiments would grow around the world. This was especially seen in South Africa, which historically sympathized with the Central Powers in 1916. Now, considering that the faction was victorious, South Africa can pursue closer relations with Germany in the continent, so the two countries would border each other. South Africa is also further in a beneficial position as they can get the British possessions, which are modern-day Lesotho, Eswatini, Botswana and Zimbabwe. Additionally, Britain historically experienced large-scale rebellions during the Irish War of Independence, so this time if there is a war between South Africa and Great Britain, I would put my money on South Africa. This is because the British cannot hope to conquer the country, and even if they have several successful landings, eventually the British citizens would demand peace and economic prosperity. As a result, even if Britain is extra competent against South Africa, the South Africans can simply retreat into their core territory, which is 5 times bigger than mainland Britain by the way, and fight in a war of attrition. The odds are stacked against the British in case there is a war, but this can also be resolved diplomatically. South Africa wasn't just a colony, but they were practically a dominion, although in 1916 they didn't have this status. The country acted as an independent nation, so them becoming a republic and abandoning George V as head of state is possible. In any case, if there is war or not, the province of Natal, which was the most pro-British, is likely to remain under the crown, but the rest would fall to South Africa. Swaziland and Lesotho would border the province of Natal, so them remaining as part of the British Commonwealth is possible, and I will allow it for this scenario. South Africa just became independent with a pro-German government, either diplomatically or with a brief war. Any alternative is possible. This is a flag that I made and I think that it will be used by this alternate South Africa, and since the province of Natal is gone from their coat of arms, it will be replaced with a cloverleaf. Still don't expect the South Africans to join the Central Powers or anything. They would just trade with Germany and benefit from this. There is no doubt to me that the German colonies in Africa and the country of South Africa would become wealthier due to the mutual trade. Both places would become wealthier, of course at the expense of Britain. I would imagine that South Africa would be among the first countries to break away, due to their geographic position, which is far away from the British. This is not to say that any other countries are not looking to abandon the crown. Historically, Britain was broke after the Great War, and now they would also be broke. But additionally, they would owe war reparations to Germany and have to fight wars in order to keep their colonies in check. This would further strain the British economy, which would result in more countries to want to abandon the crown. You can see how this cycle is destructive to the British Empire, and how getting out of it would be almost impossible. One option for Britain would be to sell Nigeria and other colonies to Germany, which would help the British economy. In this timeline, the Liberals would be in charge of Britain, which would have several changes in the post-war world. I cannot predict if Britain would go down this route or not, but I want to explore the more interesting scenario where they want to keep their pride and not sell their possessions to the country that just defeated them in the Great War, aka Germany. As a result, this cycle of self-destruction would follow in Britain, so the Irish would be among the first to take advantage of it. The Irish failed a few years prior in 1916 with the Easter Rising, but by 1921 we can expect the Irish to initiate a similar conflict to the historical Irish War of Independence, which historically succeeded. Since Britain is ruled by the Liberals, I think that it's very possible for Britain to grant autonomy to Ireland. I also think that the Irish would remain in the Commonwealth, but would become an equal partner of Britain. The Irish would see a lot of freedoms and they would have their own political parties, parliament, currency, military and etc. This would be a deal that I think most Irish people would be willing to take, despite George V remaining the country's ruler. The other alternative is that Ireland pursues full independence, but this is not too likely with Britain on their doorstep. This would all happen by the year of 1918, so we are progressing in this timeline. By that year, both France and Britain would have elections. Considering Britain just lost South Africa and gave autonomy to Ireland, while France is fighting an insurgency in Algeria, both ruling parties are going to lose some popularity in favor of some more extremist parties. In the case of Britain, the Liberals, who were led by David Lloyd George, the person who negotiated the Irish autonomy in this timeline, and historically he negotiated the establishment of the Irish Free State. Still, I expect them to keep most of their popularity, but not be able to form a government on their own. I think that the popularity of the Liberals would drop by 10%, where 8% would go to the Labour Party, which now would have 23% of the votes. There would be a new political party called the National Socialist Party, which unlike the one of Germany historically, would be actually Marxist. This is very significant, as they would get 5.8% of the votes in total, with the Conservative Party losing 2% of the votes. This new party is very much pro-war and supported the United Kingdom in the war, with the goal to defeat and destroy the Prussian militarism. It is exactly this political party, which in ideology is similar to the Labour Party, but the key difference is that the National Socialist Party would seek revenge against Germany. Looking at those percentages, no party has the majority and it's unlikely for any of these parties to work together, so there would be political instability. In the previous episode, I mentioned that the Ottoman Empire would declare jihad against the former Entente of France and Britain, but also Russia, with the goal to liberate their Muslim minorities. For the case of Britain, due to their economic and political hardships, but also geographical proximity, I think that Egypt would also rebel and demand full independence. The Egyptians can be supported by the Ottoman Empire, which is right on their doorstep. This is very significant, as the Suez Canal was vital for Britain to reach their crown jewel of India, but also for the Eurasian holdings of Malaya, Australia and New Zealand. This is why the British will not give up on it without a fight, so all British political parties will temporarily work together in order to secure control over the canal. I think that it is out of scope for Britain to try and pacify Egypt fully, as they do not border the country directly. The British used to have Kenya and Uganda as colonies, which would border Egypt, but they were seized by Germany after the Great War. The only way for Britain to reach Egypt is by a naval invasion. And in this alternate timeline, they also lost Malta and Gibraltar, so they could not resupply their ships. This makes it almost impossible for Britain to reconquer all of Egypt, but they can at least try to put some pressure on the country and at least secure the Suez Canal. The British plan would be to get Indian and other Commonwealth soldiers to British Somaliland, and then to transport them to Egypt and the Suez Canal, which is by far the easiest route. I think that the British would also have a successful landing and defend the area around the canal. But, as I said, taking all of Egypt again while the Ottomans are supporting them is close to impossible. I don't need to delay this war any further, as I predict that Egypt would break away from the crown in exchange for payments and special economic rights. The most important thing is that the British would keep the Suez Canal area, renaming it to the British Suez Canal Zone, having this cool flag that I made. Egypt would become an independent kingdom, led by Farouk I. This event is inspired by the historical 1919 Egyptian Revolution, which almost succeeded in our timeline, as the revolution was quelled, but there was implemented a more liberal constitution of Egypt. Since this revolution would be successful, the Wafd Party of Egypt would come to power. They were a nationalist liberal political party, who would fly this flag. This is actually great news for Egypt, as they would finally be independent and not be ruled by another foreign power. The Wafd Party is also likely to increase the Egyptian standard of living, although maybe at the expense of Sudan. As for the French, due to the jihad being called upon them by the Ottoman Empire, they would soon see Morocco also rebel, not just Algeria. Due to France losing most of their iron and coal supply, their production of weapons is limited, hence why they cannot hope to defeat both Moroccan and Algerian rebels at the same time. Considering how important Algeria was to France, being considered part of their core territory, the French would sign a separate peace deal with Morocco and allow them to break free, but they would try to defeat the Algerian rebels at all costs. This is the most likely option, as Morocco wasn't really part of France, they were just a French protectorate, being called French Morocco. I can show you these coins from French Morocco, and I have quite a few, ranging from 1 franc to 50 francs. The first 3 coins are from 1951, and the last 2 are a year later, from 1952. In contrast, Algeria didn't have a separate currency like Morocco, or even Tunis, as I have this 1950 Tunisian 20 franc coin. Algeria just used the currency of mainland France, so these coins. I hope that you learned something interesting from this brief coin collection segment. You can check out my coins related channel, where I upload more coin related videos. Now back to this scenario. To conclude, France would give Morocco independence, but would request help in putting down the Algerian rebels, which would be a fair trade. France would be stable, but this would all happen before the 1918 snap elections. There, a lot of things would change. Firstly, as the French Revival Party would grow by 10%, reaching 15% of the total votes. The major change is that the Republican Front would start losing support due to their loss of Morocco, so the Popular Front would grow also by 10% at the expense of the Republican Front. This means that no political party has a majority, which would also lead to a political crisis in France. Supporters of the French Revival and the Popular Front would spark up demonstrations in all French major cities, organizing rallies and getting more supporters. This would in total destabilize France drastically. As of now, both Britain and France are facing a collapsing colonial empire, in addition to having to pay war reparations and having a stagnating economy. But also they are in a political crisis, as no party has a political majority. The trouble for the British I don't think would end there. Due to the Ottoman Jihad, Pakistan is likely to rebel and want to join the Muslim faction of the Ottoman Empire, Persia and Afghanistan. Actually, I want to correct myself in a previous scenario, as I was let know that Persia joining this faction is impossible for several reasons, so I will override this decision and say that Persia is not part of the Baghdad Pact. Still, Afghanistan remains allied with the Ottoman Empire, and the Afghans have a direct border with Pakistan, so it's possible that Afghanistan invades the British Raj as to secure Pashtun majority areas. The Ottoman Empire is not involved in the war, but is supporting Afghanistan and later the Pakistani rebels, who would try to break away from the British and Hindu-dominated British Raj, seeking independence. The thing was that the British Raj was apparently made up of majority Pakistani Muslims. This means that while the Raj would have a big army, these soldiers would simply defect to the Pakistani cause, giving Pakistan a larger army and leaving the British Raj defenseless. Britain still has the Suez Canal, so they can reach the Raj relatively easily, but there isn't a lot for the British to gain in this conflict. Pakistan wasn't as valuable as India, and I mention this because I think that the Hindus would want to be equal partners in the Commonwealth. The Indians would like either independence or to become a dominion, and have their own parliament and set their own laws, but still George V would be the ruler of India. Let me remind you that the year would be around 1921, so Mahatma Gandhi was really active and his book Young India was just released. There the demands were either for independence or for self-rule. Considering that a war of independence would be too costly and Britain will not let go of their crown jewel, I think that the Indian elite and Mahatma Gandhi would go down the self-rule approach. The British would allow for this, as they would still keep India, but most importantly, India can become a partner and fight against the Muslims in Pakistan. The flag of India is likely to become either the Calcutta flag, which was one of the first unofficial flags of India, or they can use the flag that was commissioned by Mahatma Gandhi, which is this flag. The flag features a spinning wheel, which was requested by Gandhi. The color red symbolizes the Hindu people, while green symbolizes the Muslims. The color white was added later and it's meant to represent every other religion in India. The iconic orange, white and green was first adopted in 1931, so it would take 10 years for India to update their flag. In the meantime, they would use this one, but have a British watermark. Aside from flags, the more important thing is that the Indians and the British cannot defeat the Pakistani rebels because the Pakistanis control the majority of the army. Britain is cautious to pursue total victory, as this can bankrupt the nation, only so they can regain Pakistan. I think that the more likely option is that after several months of fighting, Britain directly takes control over the port of Karachi, while India retains the Kashmir province. Afghanistan will expand its borders and the rest would become the Sultanate of Pakistan. They would adopt the flag of the first Saudi state, but since they are influenced by the Ottoman Empire, the background color would be swapped to red. The British would agree to these terms because they would get to keep Karachi, which at the time was practically the most valuable part of Pakistan. But also, the British and the Indians hoped to end this war quickly with minimal losses. This is because if the war were to drag on, the British economy could collapse, while India just became a free country and would rather to consolidate power. The longer the war drags on, the less likely it is for Britain to come out on top. After all, the Germans can support their ally of the Ottoman Empire in this proxy war and weaken Britain. Overall, the British would rather end this war quickly and consolidate power in India, with the goal to keep all of Bangladesh, which was more valuable than Pakistan. The British Empire is slowly collapsing. but at least its control. As the year is 1921, there have already been 5 years since the Great War ended, so Britain is starting to regain its power. Despite this, the British Empire spans on multiple continents and the limited British army cannot be everywhere all at once. South America is finally going to get mentioned and actually become interesting in this scenario. This time, British Guyana is invaded by Brazil, as the Brazilians can seize the opportunity and annex some free land. This may seem a little strange, so I want to mention Portugal before I continue with the South American conflict. Portugal had just joined the Entente in 1916, and the war ended shortly after that. The Portuguese were not punished, and the war ended with a white peace for them. The goal for the Germans was to secure Portugal as an ally, so they tried to befriend them by not taking any of their African holdings. This would succeed, and since Britain has betrayed Portugal several times, most notably seizing Zambia and Malawi from them. This would result in Portugal to abandon Britain and their long-lasting alliance, which first started in 1373. Portugal is also likely to abolish the Republic and restore the monarchy. This is because after the 1910 revolution in Portugal, there were attempts to restore the monarchy, but Manuel II fled to Britain and urged the people not to start a civil war. This is why Portugal remained a republic, but this time with the loss of the war, all could change. Manuel II has already fled to Britain, so he won't be the king. This is because the Portuguese want a ruler that is opposed to Britain and the Entente. The best alternative for Portugal is Prince Johann Georg of Saxony. While this may seem strange, the House of Braganza, which was the ruling house of Portugal, cannot continue their rule. This is because if this were the case, Manuel II would be appointed as the monarch, which the people didn't want. The House of Braganza was apparently also pro-British. This is why I picked a candidate from the House of Wettin, which is a German royal house. The thing is that the mother of Prince Johann Georg of Saxony is Infanta Maria Anna of Portugal. This is perfect for Portugal, as they can get a German monarch, who is also anti-British, to rule the country. This would be approved by the Germans, so they can secure an ally in the Iberian Peninsula. This would also satisfy the Portuguese, who would get a monarch who is anti-British, but also Portugal would join Middle Europa and benefit economically. In Africa, the Portuguese would also benefit from trading with Germany and South Africa. So overall, this is a great move for Portugal. Now to mention Brazil, since the Brazilians are taking advantage of a British weakness, they would naturally drift to the German sphere of influence. I see Portugal and Brazil to improve relations and seek to ally with each other, with the two countries uniting as equal being a goal, but this would not happen anytime soon. I think it's fair to say that Brazil would easily conquer British Guyana, but also French Guinea as well. Germany doesn't want to increase world tension, but they are happy to see that France and Britain are weakened, while Portugal and Brazil are getting stronger. I see the Portuguese and the Brazilians to sign a treaty of mutual assistance, where they would increase trade with one another, but also work together for their shared goals. Most notably, this would include a defense clause, where if one country is attacked, the other would join. As to remain in South America, I think it's entirely possible that Argentina quickly grabs the Falklands Islands and South Georgia and South Sandwich Islands. This is possible as the British cannot really resist this, and it's unlikely they would spend money to regain these lands. To be fair, the United States of America may intervene on the side of the British and the French, but this would be very hypocritical. The Monroe Doctrine wants to prevent European colonization of the Western Hemisphere. Technically, Brazil is liberating South America from the European colonizers. This is why I think that Brazil can get away from annexing these territories in America's backyard. Still, relations between the two countries would not be great, and the German influence would increase in South America, which the United States of America would oppose. As a result of these devastating losses for Britain, the United States of America would become the dominant English-speaking country. The dominions of the United Kingdom are still loyal, but they would increase their trade with America. They can even change their currency to dollars instead of pounds. I think that Canada can request control over the British Newfoundland and Labrador, or threaten to leave the empire, so these lands would be granted. As the Americans are now the world's largest economy, in addition to not suffering losses in the Great War, they would be even stronger. A financial collapse like the Great Depression is not possible in these circumstances. So while the Americans are growing stronger, they are still pursuing a strategy of neutrality. This is the extent of what I think the British Empire would look like. In red you can see the lands that they lost in this video, and in blue you can see the places where autonomy was given to its people. This is all because the Ottoman Empire called a jihad against the British, French and Russians. The domino effect was activated, hence why Britain was so much in the span of 3 years. Still, the empire is alive, but is on life support and greatly reduced in size. The Ottoman Empire certainly made a lot of enemies, as not only France and Britain hate them, but also Russia, who I'm yet to mention how they would deal with their Muslim population rebelling. Due to the Ottoman Empire's attempt at ethnic cleansing, Bulgarians and Greeks would be hurt by the Ottomans once more, hence why the Salonika Pact is also angry at the Ottoman Empire. In total, these are all the countries that want to partition the Ottoman Empire, while the Ottomans are only supported by Afghanistan and Pakistan. There is going to be not just a third Balkan war, but something much bigger. Subscribe to see how this massive war will develop in the next episode. Thank you for watching and I hope to see you in the next video. Peace.